Welcome to Guests and Gusso. This is SCAD's virtual series of conversation and digital content with the creators and innovators remaking culture. I'm Professor Darby Sanders. I'm happy to introduce award-winning authors Jesse Holland, Cherie Renee Thomas, and Glenn Paris. Please welcome them. I just want to talk to you a little bit about them. Jesse Holland is an author, journalist, and educator. His novel, The Black Panther, Who is the Black Panther, was nominated for an NAACP Image Award in 2019. He's the author of The Invisibles, the untold story of African-American slaves inside the White House, which was named as the 2017 Silver Medal Award winner in U.S. history by the Independent Publisher Book Awards. It was selected as one of the top history books of 2016 by Smithsonian.com. He hosts the Saturday edition of C-SPAN Washington Journal. Holland edited the anthology Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda, published by Titan Books and Marvels. Also joining us this evening is Glenn Paris. Glenn is an author who works across genres, including medical mystery, Afrofuturistic science fiction, and historical fiction. A self-described sci-fi nerd, he brings his perspective as a physician to his work. That's awesome. Paris' speculative science fiction novel, Dragon's Heir, The Archaeologist's Tale, an allegory of culture, caste, and imperialism, is scheduled for publication by Outland Entertainment this spring. As a board-certified rheumatologist, Paris has practiced medicine in the Atlanta area for over 30 years. Our third guest today is Cherie Renee Thomas. Cherie Renee Thomas is an award-winning short story writer, poet, and editor. She serves as the associate editor of the award-winning journal Obsidian, Literature and Arts in the African Diaspora, and the editor of the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, founded in 1949. Thomas was recently honored as a 2020 World Fantasy Award finalist in the Special Award Professional category for her contributions to the genre. I wish we could have some way of giant applause and welcoming everybody. You can do the balloons, the hands, whatever you want through Zoom, but please welcome. Their work is featured in the new anthology, Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda. I can't get it right. There it is. It's somewhere behind me. There it is. It's behind me. Beautiful, beautiful book published by Titan Books and Marvel. You can buy that book. It's on sale at the museum gift shop, the Scadfash Museum gift shop. They're here tonight to share their insights on science fiction, fantasy, Afrofuturism, and the enduring power of Wakanda. Our discussion is presented by the Ruth Carter exhibition, Afrofuturism and Costume Design, currently on display at the Scadfash Museum. The Scadfash Museum of Fashion and Film through September 12th, 2021. Definitely check it out. It's absolutely amazing. So after the conversation, we'll talk for about 45 minutes. We'll have a brief moment. You can ask the panel a few questions. So if you think of some questions as we go, please have them ready. About 30 or 45 minutes from now, I'll turn to everyone in this wonderful audience and they'll ask you guys the questions instead of me. I'm sure their questions will be more interesting than mine. But I wanted to start off first with a question from Ruth Carter, or a statement that Ruth Carter has made. Ruth Carter defines Afrofuturism as follows. It is the African culture and diaspora using technology and intertwining it with imagination, self-expression, and an entrepreneurial spirit. This promotes a philosophy for Black Americans, Africans, and Indigenous people to believe and create without the limiting construct of slavery and colonialism. This manifests a cultural aesthetic that merges traditional and modern with function. In light of Carter's definition, how would each of you define the term Afrofuturism in literature or other creative pursuits? Maybe Jesse, do you mind starting us off? Do you want to jump in and respond to that question? Yeah.
Yes, I will definitely jump in first. First of all, thank y'all so much for having us here. Glad to see so many people here to hear us talk, and I really appreciate the museum and the Ruth Carter exhibit for bringing us on tonight. I would not argue with a single word that Ruth Carter said here or at any other place, at any other time. I would never argue with anything Ruth Carter says. But let me just add in here that what I see Afrofuturism as is a form of writing that allows us to tell our stories from our own gaze, from our own view, without it being affected by some of the things that have happened in the past. It allows us to tell stories of fantasy and of science fiction without being limited by the forms of storytelling that we've seen in the past. It allows us to push forward and see a future that not only includes African Americans and people of color, but a future that is inspired by African Americans and other people of color. So that's how it's the only thing I would add into what Ruth Carter says. I wouldn't say that Afrofuturism does not include slavery and the trials and tribulations that people of color have been through in America, but I would say it includes our perceptions of this and pushes it forward. Whereas that's not the only story that's being told about us, where we're not only just talking about our past, but we're also talking about a future as well, where our ideas, our inspirations, our trials, and our tribulations are included in those stories.
Cherie, did you mind responding to that, or you want to add to that? Or?
For me, it's a creative lens. It's like an analytical tool. It's also a creative resource for people to kind of modify it, remix it, freak it, any way you need to around the world to create the Afrofutures, and I put an S on it because there is only one. There's more than one that they need. So I've watched it evolve for the past 20 plus years in terms of conversations. So in my lane of it, it's the literary lane of it, the writing part of it, but it's also a tool, creative resource, or a way of thinking about Black lives in the world today, in the past, and in the possible future through many art forms, whether it's music, which is probably the easiest one to think of, whether it's fashion or architecture and design and performance. So it's all of those things, and it's none of those things in terms of it's always being modified. It's always being created, So, yeah.
Lynn, do you want to weigh in here? Do you want to offer?
Sure. I have I guess a very broad impression of Afrofuturism. It's the answering of the question, what if, when one extrapolates from today or from the past, with or without the burden of the slave trade and all the atrocities that followed. Without, what happens if there was no interruption and Africa developed in a different way? The geopolitics of the past were very, very complex. African cultures traded broadly with Asia, with Europe, and some say with the Americas in pre-Columbian times. If you extrapolate from there forward, you come up with all kinds of things in the multiverse that is the what if question. And I think that's where, that's the fertile soil where Afrofuturism thrives. And it can involve African descendants, it can involve European descendants, it can involve aliens. But when viewed through the lens of that root, then that's what Afrofuturism is. It can be very, very broad. It can have many flavors, and it's something that we haven't seen in the traditional, science fiction that was rooted in rocket ships, ray guns, and little green men.
That's awesome. Well said. Jesse, do you mind talking about, with all that in mind, how you put together this collection, where the idea came from, how it evolved, and how you worked with the many talented writers and contributors?
Well, I was extremely lucky. Back in 2016, Marvel approached me about this little known comic book that they were planning to turn into a movie. And I remember the editor from Marvel calling me and asking me, had I ever heard of the character Black Panther? Now, I will tell you, I'm like Glenn. I'm a longtime comic book guy. So I was like, of course I know who the Black Panther is. So Marvel came to me and asked me to turn Reginald Hudlin's 6-issue comic book called Who is the Black Panther into a 90,000-word novel that would introduce this character to the world of literature. Black Panther had existed since 1966, but he wasn't really known outside of the comic book culture. So they wanted to introduce him to the world of literature because they had this movie coming up that was going to come out in 2018, and they wanted people to know who this character was. So I ended up writing my first full-length novel, which was called Black Panther: Who is the Black Panther? And of course, then the Black Panther movie comes out in 2018, and the world goes insane. The world goes Black Panther crazy. And I've been such a comic book guy for such a long time that one of my first major movie experiences was watching the Michael Keaton Batman. Well, when that Michael Keaton Batman movie came out, DC Comics put out a line of novels to go along with it, including a Batman anthology called The Further Adventures of Batman, where you had writers like Isaac Asimov writing Batman stories. Well, for me, the Black Panther movie was just as revolutionary as that Batman movie was. The movie changed the game for a lot of people in comic books and movies and literature. So if Michael Keaton and Batman had an anthology, I was like, I can't wait to see all of these great writers come up with their own versions of Wakanda. So I called Marvel and said, okay, so this is what I want to do. I want to write, and I want to write a story that's going to be in this great anthology about Wakanda. And I want to get all these other great writers to write these stories. And you guys got to help me get this done. And Marvel came back to me and said, guess what? You're the editor. Now go out and find these authors. And I was like, okay, I just wanted to write a short story, but if this is the only way I can do it, then I will go out and find the best writers, the best Afrofuturism writers, the best science fiction writers, the best fantasy writers, the best writers, and we'll all get together and we'll come up with our own stories. And that's literally how Black Panther Tales of Wakanda came about. I wanted to read what writers like Cherie, what writers like Glenn would do with the world of Wakanda. And we were specific in that we didn't just want stories about T'Challa. We all love T'Challa, but the thing that really, really makes